Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and this is Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelf, because why not? Let's get on with the video. I'm extra excited today because this series that we're talking about today is one of my all-time favourites. I'm talking, of course, you've read the title, about the Winternight Trilogy. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Quick disclaimers before we start. I think I had review copies of books 2 and 3 in this series, but the hardback copies that I'm going to show you today, I bought all of them myself. As always, all opinions are my own regardless of what's been sent to me or not. Nobody's paying me to talk about books. I'm also going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible while still talking about a trilogy. If you want to go into this series completely blind, then you may be in the wrong place. Some background context for you. The first book in the Winternight Trilogy, The Bear and the Nightingale, released in January of 2017. When that slot starts stacking these behind me. Ding. The sequel, The Girl in the Tower, followed in December of that year. Am I going to have enough room? And the trilogy finished with Winter of the Witch, which released in December of 2019. I can keep dates in my head. There we go. It's a historical fantasy set in Russia in, I think, sort of around about the 13th, 14th century. While there are a couple of historical events referenced in the book that Catherine Arden also goes into in her author's note, this series I would probably more describe as an original legend or kind of fairy tale folklore kind of thing. All that within a real world setting. I personally would be more inclined to describe this series as adult fantasy rather than YA, but I think that's just about how these books were marketed in the UK. It would actually probably make quite a good crossover book if you read a lot of YA and you want to read more adult fantasy, or kind of going the other way. Let's talk about Catherine Arden, the author. This was her debut trilogy, which is madness to me. It's so good. She's currently based in Vermont, but she's lived in all sorts of places, including Moscow. Her original degree was in, I think, French and Russian. It makes sense. Alongside this trilogy, her other series that she's released is, I think, a middle grade spooky series, which I have not read and haven't really looked into. So if you've read those, let me know. Before we get into the plot and everything I liked and didn't like about this series and why I think that you 1000% should read this, I just want to say that while Catherine Arden does provide a handy list of terms in the back of all of these books, there isn't a pronunciation guide in any of them. And as I've discussed in previous videos, I haven't really felt the need to learn any Russian. Unlikely to be welcome there. Me trying to grab my rainbow flag made everything go terrible, I apologise. So if and when I butcher the Russian words in this review, please do forgive me. I do not know. I am not wise. I never claimed to be. Plot summary. I was quite pleased with what I wrote for the plot summary of this, so I'm going to read it from my notes rather than trying to memorise it and then tell you. If you want to donate to my coffee so I can get a teleprompter, please do. The Winternight Trilogy follows heroine Vasya, who lives with her family at the edge of the Russian wilderness. But things are changing in Russia. Christianity has taken hold and people no longer leave gifts for the household spirits. The old world, the world that Vasya can for some reason still see, is fading away. As the dangers of neglecting the old ways begin to build, Vasya gets caught up in a story that seems to come out of the old tales, taking her far away from home and everything her family might expect from her. That's probably the most spoiler-free kind of description I could personally write. One thing worth mentioning while we are on plot is that all three of these books have very different plots. They feel very different in a lot of ways. It's the writing that really draws them together. So I would say that book 1 and 3 are the most fairy tale folklore-like books, and book 2 feels much more like a kind of girl power adventure with a lot of magic in it. Just worth mentioning, if you're planning on reading this series all in one go, you might be a bit confused. I adore Vasya as a main character with all of my being. In a lot of ways, this is kind of a not like other girls story, which I think sometimes I don't get on with. She isn't the young lady people expect her to be. She doesn't want to get married. She has this connection to the old world in a world where things are changing. She doesn't want to be tied down. In some ways that can be very irritating, and in some books you're just like, come on dear, just because you don't want to get married doesn't make you completely unique and different. But in this case, I think because Vasya's circumstances are so different and get even more different as the books go on, I didn't mind it so much and it actually feels very powerful. One of the other reasons it works is because Vasya, while she fully accepts that she does not want to get married, do etc, etc, she doesn't shame the people who do want that, and she never says, you know, why you foolish woman getting married so that you can provide for your family. How dare you? She knows what she wants and she doesn't force that on anyone else. I also think Vasya is just one of those characters for whom those of us who always hope that one day something would click in our heads and we'd be able to see fairies, she's one of those characters. It's wish fulfillment for me. I have to say, having reread all of these books in 2020, you definitely feel Vasia's character development across the 3 books much more, which is interesting because she starts off as a very strong character. So it's interesting to see where that character can go and where it does go across the story. It's also even more painful rereading book 1 to see people who, in theory, love Vasia trying to push her into this box that she really doesn't fit in. Girls with Swords, is anyone fracking surprised that I love her? The other characters in this book are great too. Vasia's older brother Sasha features quite a lot. Sasha provides quite a nice counterpoint to Vasia because of where his character goes, which I can't spoil for you. But again, it's really interesting to see how his character changes across the 3 books with the knowledge that he has. The antagonist in these books, or one of them, because I can't name them because it's, again, probably too much of a spoiler, but the antagonist is one that I think is really, really well done and lovely and complex, and one of those antagonists that you can still understand. Essentially, yay character development across these 3 books. The setting. I love a story rooted in folklore, and this absolutely feels like one of them. I confess to not having a robust knowledge of Russian folklore beyond kind of, I know that Baba Yaga is a thing, but there is enough detail in here that I definitely feel like Catherine Arden did the research. I think one of the strongest aspects of the setting are these creatures that inhabit the world alongside humans who are kind of fading as Christianity takes hold. Again, it appeals to the person with magic that no one else can see child in me. From hearth spirits to mushroom spirits to magical horse companions, this series has everything I want. I love all of the creatures in this. The plot. I've mentioned that these books go to places you wouldn't necessarily expect and that the 3 books are very different from one another. I absolutely think that's a selling point. I think it keeps things really fresh across a series that is quite slow. I don't know if that would be different reading the 3 books back to back. I left quite a fair gap certainly between 1 and 2, which is probably where the biggest difference is. But I think that the gorgeous descriptive writing and the strength of Vasia's characterization helps tie the 3 books together. I have to say that the plot of book 2 is probably my favourite, likely because it includes the most Vasia being a hero of all 3, and it also has the least amount of my heart is broken forever, which, you know, I like to be happy, and this isn't the happiest of series. That being said, if you're looking for a series to make you feel things, this is absolutely one of them. I don't cry at books too often, it's not at every sad moment I weep, but in my reread of this series, who did the tears fall? I even cried at a non-sad moment in book 2 because it reminded me of a sad thing that was going to happen in book 3. What? This series just kind of like sits in your heart, and before you know it, you're totally invested in a character, and then when bad things happen to them, you get real sad about it. Things to keep in mind when you're reading the series. As I say, it is a little bit slow. I really found that when I reread Bear and the Nightingale. Bear and the Nightingale in particular is slow to start. It takes Vasia from childhood through to adolescence, and it's quite a slow journey to get there. I think that's part of why book 2 feels so different, is that it takes you right in at the action where book 1 has that slow build. I would say don't get bogged down in the Bear and the Nightingale because you'll find yourself getting stuck. Just power through that one, and then the other 2 are beautiful, and then you love book 1 in response to that. Another thing to keep in mind, I think it's probably common sense, but this is Russia in the 13th or 14th century, so there's a fair amount of not particularly being positive about some things. There's quite a lot of, you know, get thee to a nunnery kind of feeling. There's also quite a lot of threats of violence against women. I don't think anything terrible happens on page, but there is the language around that. So if that's not something that you're used to, or that's not something that you're in a place to read, maybe don't read those sections. I'm not sure. I would say they definitely ramp up in later books where Vasia's in the city a bit more. Yeah, that's everything I want to say about those books, I think, other than I never thought of myself as a horse girl, but this book really made me love horses. There's that. I also didn't mention the romance because I think it's probably something you want to discover for yourself, but there is a romance in here and I really love it. It's my favourite kind of romance. Comparisons, other things you might want to read if you've read and enjoyed this, or if you're just interested. Uprooted by Naomi Novik is another one I would mention. I know Spinning Silver is the more logical connector, but I haven't reread Spinning Silver recently enough to be able to wholeheartedly fully recommend it, so I'm going to recommend Uprooted to you. If you want books that will make you cry, that are kind of YA, Laini Taylor's Strange the Dreamer is another one I would definitely recommend. And if you want more girls with swords being amazing and defying everyone's expectations, Tamara Pierce. I've recently got into them and I absolutely love them, and I think they were pitched a bit younger than these books are, but they would serve the same joyous purpose. Should you read these? I think absolutely 100% yes. I can't recommend them highly enough. As I say, they are one of my favourite series of all time. I don't know when this video is going to be going up, the beauty of this series, but I will say they are my favourite autumnal winter reads. They're the Winternight Trilogy. It's not unusual that that's the case. I think you could read them year round, but they definitely sit well in the colder months for me. In a world with no bookish obligations, I would probably read them every single year. In fact, I might. If you enjoy fairy tale vibes and folklore vibes to your fantasy, and you haven't read these yet, add them to cart. Do it now. If you can recommend anything similar to these books, I am always here for it. Please drop me those recommendations in the comments below. Or let me know if you've read these and if you enjoyed them, or if you didn't enjoy them, why. I would love to know that as well. While you're down there commenting, you can follow me on all of my social media. That's linked in the description below. You can also subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews, and what I liked about this series. What I like about the series, why I think you should read it. I'm also going to try and cover up the yellow, because I don't like it. That's a bit better. Oh, stop moving. From horse spirits, no,